Hey, what's up everyone? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. In this video, I'm going to share with you some music production tips while recreating the beat in Dua Lipa's Electricity. Let's dive right in. So let's start by recreating the drums. I have a group track here in Ableton Live, loaded with a drum rack for the kick and clap, and a couple other audio tracks filled with loops to kind of help gel everything together. Let's focus on the kick and snare, the kick and clap, sorry. And what I'm going to do is slightly nudge one of the claps. And I'm going to nudge it off the grid, meaning I'm going to adjust the timing of that clap so that it actually creates a nice cool texture against the other clap. So I'm just simply going to click that and let the little dotted line select all the claps in that row. And once they're all selected, just hold down the command key and just nudge them slightly to the right. It actually widens up the sound of that clap a little bit more. This is what it's like on the grid. This is off the grid. Pretty cool. All right, now let's add a classic house loop on top of the kick and clap. So I've got that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an EQ to just carve out any of that low end that's coming from the kick drum that's inside this loop. So let me just solo the loop now. I like the way it sounds, even like the sound of the kick in there layered with my kick. We just need to take away a little bit of that low end. So I'm going to grab an EQ 8 here in Ableton Live, drag and drop that onto that track, and just using the first frequency pot here, I'm just going to sweep away some of that low end, right? This is otherwise known as a high pass because we're just letting the highs pass through. All right, so let's just start and sweep our way up. Then immediately when you're sweeping the EQ, you can hear almost like the weight of that loop kind of just dropped. It got really thin. So I don't want to take away too much. I just don't want a lot of that muddy, boomy bottom end from this loop to interfere with anything else in my kick and clap. So. And we'll use another point here on the EQ and take away some of that low mid. So let's listen A-B with the EQ and without it. So with the EQ off, yeah, it felt beefier, felt more bottom heavy. But when I put the EQ back on, it felt a little bit more tighter, right? My kick was a lot more present and the loop just kind of did what it needed to do. So I can bring the bottom end back once we effect process the whole drum bus together. So let's go ahead and add another loop on top of that. I'll solo that loop. And this one has just a little bit more percussion, and I'm using that, I'm lowering it down. I'm just gonna have that as texture, kind of just like filling in a lot of the gaps that we hear, but not so upfront as the other loop. It's just more for the texture, and we're doing the same thing. I've got an EQ on here and taking away all that low end, and I'm doing a little bit more than I did with the first loop, because the first loop, it was okay to have some of that low mid there. It gave some beef to the kick as well, my kick and clap. So. And then I'm going to add a shaker on top of that, because when I listen to the original record, the reference, I noticed that the shaker is really, there is a shaker present, whether they're using it in a loop or added a shaker on top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and implement that in this. So there we've got our drum elements. Now let's do some effect processing to kind of glue them all together. And I'm just going to go straight towards the drum bus plugin here in Ableton Live. Love that plugin. And just check out what it sounds like just even dropping the plugin directly onto it. Now I mentioned that I was going to add some more bottom end or some bass boost on here, and the drum bus is already doing that with this distortion. So there's 3 different types: the soft, medium, and hard. And when you use hard, it adds the digital clipping, but it also gives it a bass boost underneath that as well. So I like what it's doing to the drums. I'm just going to do a little bit of EQing after that, just to carve out some of that boxiness that I'm hearing, because when I listen to the drums in the reference, they're a little bit thin. They're not so chunky and and a lot of the classic house loops kind of sound that way. So I'm just going to thin them out a little bit with a little EQing. Cool. So let's go ahead and move over to the bass line. Now, when I focus my attention on the bass line in the reference, it has a dark, subby tone to it. So I know immediately I'm going to gravitate towards a sine wave. So I'm going to go ahead and use an analog here in Ableton Live, drag and drop that over, and let's just choose one oscillator and go from the sawtooth that comes by default and choose sine wave. Now, if you're not familiar with the tones and the different types of waveforms, I would definitely encourage you to just practice by selecting all the different types of tones and of waveforms and types of waveforms, and just get familiar with the tone, the texture, the way it sounds. And that's going to give you a better reference point as to how to start when trying to recreate a sound that you're looking for. Just kind of study the 4 basic food groups, so to speak: your sine, triangle, square, and sawtooth, and just get familiar with that you're going from sine, lower, darker tones, to a brighter tone, which would end up being the sawtooth. So once you're familiar with that, you have more or less a good starting point in recreating a sound. So let's go here with sine wave, and I'm going to go a couple octaves down. We'll go 2, and let's just go ahead and listen to the riff. Now the riff itself is a great riff. It's a great pocket for the bass line, but we need to tighten it up. So I'm going to go to the amp envelope here and structure the actual shape of that. And before we do that, I have to actually go into the volume section and go from 8 voice polyphony to mono, so that a lot of the notes don't overlap each other and you get some muddiness when they do clash. So back to the amp envelope, let's lower the release. So we got a nice snappy let go of the note once it stops playing. As opposed to a long release, which just keeps playing after the note plays. Even it's set to mono, still kind of lingers too much. So let's go back to the shorter release, and we're going to lower the sustain a little bit too. That means how long the note plays while that actual note is being played. Cool. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of sidechain compression, and this is what's going to give it a nice bump in the groove as well. So we're going to put a compressor on there, click the sidechain option by clicking that little arrow in the top. And let's go to drums, and right here we're going to go to kick and clap and choose the kick from my kick and clap. Now a little bit of that sidechain actually helped that bass get a little bit tighter with the drums, so it's really good, and it definitely gives that nice pocket for the bass. So let's go ahead and move over to some of the musical elements in the chorus. So next we're going to add some piano chords that we hear going on in the chorus. So I'm going to use the Ableton Live stock grand piano in the instruments folder, drag and drop that, and let's take a listen to. Alright, now to kind of shape the sound of this, we're going to use a multi-band dynamic compressor. It's a compressor that works by compressing specific frequencies. So if you got an EQ and you married it with a compressor, you got a multi-band dynamic. So I'm going to use this preset OTT, over the top, because it's just crazy slamming compression on the 3 bands. So just drag and dropping that, and it's just a great preset to use to kind of bring out something. and then you can kind of dial it back. So I'm gonna go ahead and just so let's take the reverb off initially just a little bit and shorten the release of that and just brighten up the pianos just a little bit. And then go ahead and adjust the hardness of it. Now the hardness attains to the velocity of the performance. And that the OTT multi-band dynamic makes a big difference. So let's go ahead and listen to it with it on and off. Yeah, definitely get that boxiness really is evident when it's off. So I'm gonna leave that on and mess around with the tone, and let's just go ahead and see what that sounds like with the bass line and the drums. Cool. What I'm going to do is duplicate this channel so it copies everything we've just did, and we're going to use a MIDI plugin called Pitch to just keep that same performance, but we're going to go an octave higher. So just by clicking the grand piano channel and hitting Command D, we're going to duplicate it. We're going to do the same exact thing, and this time we're going to the MIDI effects folder, grab the pitch, and drag that over into that channel. And I'm going to go over here and set that 12 semitones higher. So now we have the same piano patch, but just played an octave higher. What I'm gonna do here is just give it a little bit of and kind of just marry the two of them together. Now let's go ahead and add that sustained string note that we hear in the back. Gotta love that classic house string sustain. So I'm gonna go to the analog, head over to the string category inside the analog, and we'll choose the M-tron strings. Just drag that over here, and double clicking any of the clip slots will give you a 1-bar clip here. So let's go ahead and put C3, and just extend that all the way out. So we have a 1-bar note. And then I'm gonna hold my shift key and press the arrow key up so that we can jump straight from this C3 to C4. So we're gonna go a couple octaves. We're gonna do this until we get to C7. There you go. And now let's go ahead and just have that play. So I might have to open up the release here so that it just doesn't feel like it's being restarted every time it loops over. So just open the release and a little bit more of the reverb. Now, one thing that caught my attention that I really loved in the song is this note that Dua sings that gets carried into the chorus. It's like the sustained note, the sustained reverb. And so I'm going to recreate that. So I've sampled myself singing that same high note. Sounds like a dying octopus, but there you go. And what we're going to do is just do a little bit of sound designing, is particularly using the freeze option inside Ableton Live's reverb to allow it to sustain. So what I'm going to do is go to the audio effects, and we're going to head over to reverb. And we're going to just scale back the dry and wet. And the trick here is hitting the freeze once you found the kind of tone that you would like to sustain. So for instance, if I just trigger this and hit freeze, it'll freeze it and sustain that as long as freeze. So that's what we're going to do. So while this is playing, I'll trigger it and hit the freeze button, and you'll see how it just sustains. So with a little bit of automation, we can have the freeze become enabled and then disable it when we don't no longer want to hear it. So what I'm going to do now is add a little bit of sidechaining. So I'll go to the bass, so that I don't have to do all the routing and everything. I'm going to hold Option so that we can drag an exact copy of that sidechain compressor and now add it right onto after the reverb. Maybe just bring the dry and wet down a little bit, and let's go ahead and try that again. So it's a really, really cool thing to implement in a production. Well, I hope this video has been helpful, encouraging, and inspiring in any way. I hope you picked up a couple tips or two here that you can add to your production. And I also want to equip you with tools that you can add towards your music production. I want to give you a sample pack, absolutely free. And this is a sample pack including construction kits, loops, one-shots, hits, and this is put together and compiled from some projects that I've worked on over the past year or so. And so this is 100% free, absolutely yours. Just click the link below in the description box to download this. It's 100% royalty free as well. That means that whatever sounds you put together and use in your productions, you're free to use and share with the rest of the world. So once again, this is yours absolutely free. Click the link below to download this sample pack that I've put together. Also, you can visit www.beatacademy.com/pack and download your sample pack today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.